Hello everyone, and we're back ranking Star Trek two-parter episodes. Previously we've covered The Next Generation and Voyager, but now we come to Enterprise. And of course, if you're familiar with the show, you'll know this gets a little bit complicated, because over the course of the show, Enterprise had quite a few format changes, from mostly standalone episodes in seasons 1 and 2, to a season-spanning arc in season 3, and a cluster of 2- and 3-parters for season 4. So, how am I distinguishing these exactly? Well, I suppose a more accurate title for the video would be Enterprise Multi-Parters Ranked rather than just two-parters, because otherwise the list would only have like 3 entries. For Season 3 though, while it is one big arc, I've decided to whittle it down to only the episodes which follow on directly from a previous episode. There has to be a cliffhanger in between somewhere. And just like with the previous videos, the first feature-length episode of the series Broken Bow isn't on this list, because while it is broadcast as a two-parter, sometimes it was made with the intention of being a single feature-length episode. Now, whether you agree with all of these caveats or not is up to you, and if you include some of those episodes that I've chosen to leave out, let me know where you rank them in the comments below. Before we get stuck into things though, this video is sponsored by my gaming channel, SideQuest. Up until recently, it's really just been a fun hobby, but recently we've committed to really growing the channel. Our main 2 series right now are deep dives, video essays, in-depth reviews, and other analytical videos on our favourite or indeed least favourite games, and licensed game Hell, a gameplay series where we sit down and have a laugh playing games exclusively licensed from movies and TV shows. We upload something new every 2 weeks, alternating between the 2 series. It would really mean a great deal if you could show the same support to SideQuest as you've done on this channel. Head over by clicking the link down below to check out our videos, as well as subscribing so you can stay up to date with all the new uploads. Thanks again for supporting what I do, and with this promo out of the way, let's get stuck into the video you came to see. Now, it should be no surprise to some of you viewers that I'm ranking Affliction and Divergence from Season 4 at the very bottom. Now, just like with Voyager and The Next Generation, I don't think any of these two-parters are bad. In fact, Affliction Divergence has some great moments, but as I've said many times before, I simply don't give a crap about explaining why the Klingons lost their headridgers during the TOS era. To me, this just represents Trekkies obsessing over small details which don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, and missing the forest for the trees somewhat. While there is an attempt at telling an interesting story about personal and cultural identity, which is obviously affected by this physical change, for me, it's all in service of answering a question which never needed answering in the first place. The two-parter is at least entertaining though, with some strong action set pieces and scenes of escalating tension which Enterprise became so good at in its latter half. It's also cool to see both of the NX ships working side by side, but ultimately I think whenever it comes to rewatching Enterprise, this is a two-parter I just kind of throw on in the background. It's a way to kill time before we get to the much better episodes. Our next entry is Stormfront from the beginning of Season 4. Now, as I said in my retrospective review on Enterprise, I think this episode is in completely the wrong place. While the Xindi arc was technically part of the temporal Cold War, taking a sharp turn from the end of that arc into a Wolfenstein riff is really jarring. That being said, Stormfront on its own is decent enough. Alternate history World War II has always been fertile ground for sci-fi stories. However, I feel like Stormfront's biggest problem is that it seemingly takes forever to deliver the goods. Most of the episode is Archer hanging around in occupied suburbs and conversations between alien Nazis and regular Nazis. It's thrilling when we finally get to see the Enterprise having an aerial dogfight with tricked out German fighters, but that sense of pulpy fun is missing from the rest of the two-parter. What places it above the previous entry though is that it is really fun when it finally hits its stride, and Silik's last hurrah is a genuine high point. Speaking of the temporal Cold War though, above that we have Shockwave. Honestly, this is probably where the temporal Cold War arc should have ended, as it was really running out of steam by the end of Season 2. That being said, Shockwave is a nice bit of timey-wimey action-adventure entertainment. The inciting, supposed accident in which the Enterprise crew seemingly wipe out an entire alien colony is a real shock. It brings to the forefront the really interesting themes of the Enterprise crew trying to prove themselves to the Vulcans, and the complicated relationship between both races. The second part, which sees the Enterprise taken over by the Suliban and the crew fighting to take it back, has been done before, but it's well executed here. There's always some satisfaction to be had watching the crew engineer their way back into having control of their ship. It's all fairly engaging, and that final scene confronting Ambassador Saval is great. Our next entry is a much bigger leap up in quality though, with Season 4's Borderland, Cold Station 12 and the Augments. As I said in my retrospective video, for me Season 4 of Enterprise skirts dangerously close to being shallow fan service at times, and on paper that's all this three-parter is, right? I mean, we have a stunt cast Brent Spiner as Dr. Soong's ancestor, and Eugenics Wars Augments name-dropping Khan, but thankfully this three-parter avoids that shallowness thanks to excellent writing and pacing and terrific character work. While the Augment characters share Khan's ideology, wisely none of these characters are attempts at replicating Khan. In fact, many of these superhuman warriors almost behave like angsty teenagers, and it's pretty refreshing, and Alec Newman is a formidable villain as Malik. There's nothing cookie-cutter with these characters. They aren't moustache-twirling evildoers. Arak Soong genuinely believes in the benefits of his work, and Malik's anger at the way he and his family are treated due to what they were born as is understandable, even if his actions do go too far. It's a real tragedy which helps the story throw some emotional punches, while also thrilling the audience with some of the best action scenes of the show. All around really great stuff. Above that we have The Forge, Awakening and Kier Shara. I've always felt like the portrayal of the Vulcans in Enterprise was one of the strongest aspects of the series. After becoming such staples and so familiar to the franchise, I really appreciate the way the Vulcans were given a new spin in this show. While the Augment trilogy of episodes was great, to me this three-parter is the first true showcase of what Enterprise Season 4 could accomplish on such limited resources. While the change in format came out of budgetary limitations, this story feels like a true epic, a watershed moment for the Vulcan people with multiple nations at stake. Not only do we have Archer delving into the fascinating history of the Vulcan people, but we also get to see Trip in command of the Enterprise racing to stop the outbreak of a war in a spectacular climactic space battle. While the story is yet again filling in some blanks on the Star Trek wiki, that feels more like a bonus rather than the substance of the episodes. Even if you don't know the larger context of the Vulcans in Star Trek, this is still a gripping watch. That sentiment can similarly be applied to Babel 1, United, and the Aenar. Honestly, this three-parter and the previous one may swap places on this list depending on my mood, but for now I'll put it here. I remember reading Brannon Braga saying of Season 4 and this three-parter in particular that maybe this is what Enterprise always should have been from the beginning, and it's easy to see why he'd say that. While the plan was always to lay the groundwork of seeing the founding of the Federation in some way, this was really the first time the show properly committed to that concept, and it's incredibly satisfying. After seeing the Vulcans, Andorians, and Tellarites bicker with each other for so many episodes, watching them finally come together makes you want to punch the air. But the story still features that richness of character and reverence for the material, which allows the audience to have plenty of pulpy fun without it ever feeling shallow. For example, Archer and Shran having an elaborate knife fight in the cargo bay is so quintessentially TOS, but the circumstances which lead to this scene don't feel at all forced or silly. Ultimately, these episodes feel like a celebration of the show up until this point, and a commemoration of the larger franchise. Above that is Azati Prime and Damage. This is really where the gloves came off with the Xindi arc. Of course, the big moment of this two-parter comes at the end of Azati Prime, where the Enterprise is ambushed and pummeled into a smouldering shipwreck in that jaw-dropping cliffhanger. And while their escape could be called a little contrived, it's great to finally see the consequences of this cliffhanger be embraced, not just in the next episode, but for the rest of the season. Just seeing the characters having to wade through these familiar sets overtaken by rubble and debris really hammers home how desperate the situation has become, and the finale of Damage basically one-ups the end of Azati Prime, not in how the Enterprise crew are treated, but in how they treat others. Archer raiding a friendly ship to steal their warp core is truly his darkest moment. This is a two-parter which crosses lines no one ever thought a Star Trek show would cross, and in my opinion, it really pulled off this feat incredibly well. On the complete other end of the spectrum though, we have In a Mirror Darkly. This two-parter is just so infectiously fun. In some ways it almost feels like a precursor to the kind of loving send-up of familiar Star Trek tropes which would make Lower Decks so enjoyable. The twist on the first contact scene, the new darker opening, all the midriff uniforms, it's all so delightfully absurd but sincere that it makes it so much fun. The evil counterparts of the regular cast have their moustache twirling turned up to such a high degree, it's a wonder they haven't all stabbed each other in the back by the end of part 1. This is shameless, blatant fan service, and if it was in any other story I'd be rolling my eyes, but setting it in the Mirror universe somehow makes it all work. At some point you just surrender yourself to how over the top it all is and enjoy the ride. It's the sillier side of Star Trek, but it's still Star Trek. And now we come to the second from the top spot, now with Demons and Terra Prime. This is really an episode which could only have happened in Enterprise. A story showing humanity still has a long way to go until it reaches that near-utopian-like future we've previously seen in The Next Generation. It's dark and eerily relevant with its themes, but also character-focused and ultimately hopeful by the end. Trip and T'Pol losing the child they never knew they had is utterly heartbreaking, but Archer's famous Threads That Bind speech, which concludes the episode, manages to leave things on a high. This should have been the true finale of Enterprise as a whole, rather than These Are the Voyages. For the top spot, however, we have the conclusion of the Xindi arc with the Council, Countdown, and 0 Hour. I know not everyone agrees, but for me the Xindi arc is the best part of Enterprise, and these 3 episodes pack in everything which made it great. That sense of desperation and high stakes as the characters are pushed right up to and over the edge, the razor-sharp plotting and direction which makes every set piece an edge-of-your-seat thrill ride, that character-rich storytelling among the Xindi as well as the regular cast, and the imaginative sci-fi concepts involving the sphere builders, not to mention some good old-fashioned TOS thrills with the one-on-one fight between Archer and the reptilian commander Dolim. Aside from the aforementioned intrusion from Stormfront, this is a spectacular ending to a brilliant arc. So that's my ranking. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments below, and also don't forget to jump over to my gaming channel SideQuest. Thank you for watching. If you like these videos, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on my new uploads. If you want to help the channel grow, join my patrons or my YouTube members, where you can see videos early as well as some other exclusive content. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons and members who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.